Long ago, in the shadow of an ancient temple nestled high in the mountains of Peru, a group of villagers witnessed something impossible. A beam of golden light piercing the clouds, illuminating the stones with symbols no one could read. When the light faded, the symbols remained, glowing faintly for days before vanishing without a trace. Was it a message from the gods, a sign of something greater? Stories like this have echoed through time, whispers of the divine touching our world in ways that defy explanation. And they're not confined to one place or people. From the deserts of Egypt to the forests of Scandinavia, every culture has its own tales of miracles, visions, and encounters that transcend the ordinary. These are the divine wonders that have shaped faith, inspired art, and even altered the course of history. What if these moments weren't just legends? What if they were glimpses of something beyond our understanding? Today, we're setting out on a journey through 35 of the most captivating stories of divine intervention ever recorded, events so extraordinary, they've left even the most skeptical historians and scientists searching for answers. Picture standing at the edge of the Red Sea as it parts before your eyes, or hearing a voice from a burning bush that speaks your name. Imagine witnessing the heavens open above a battlefield, revealing figures no mortal could describe. These aren't just stories, they're experiences that have stirred souls, sparked revolutions, and left an indelible mark on humanity's collective memory. This isn't just about recounting miracles, it's about stepping into the mystery, feeling the awe that must have shaken those who lived through these moments. Were they messages from a higher power, cosmic accidents, or something else entirely? As we explore these divine wonders together, you'll hear voices from across the centuries, kings and peasants, scholars and soldiers, all united by encounters that defied reason. Some will chill you to the bone, others will fill you with hope, but one thing's certain, by the end you'll see history and perhaps even our world in a whole new light. So take a deep breath, the journey begins now. One of the most stunning and widely documented divine wonders unfolded over a small Portuguese village called Fátima in the year 1917. On an ordinary October afternoon, as many as 70,000 people, farmers, journalists, even staunch skeptics, gathered in a field after 3 young children claimed the Virgin Mary had promised them a miraculous sign. What happened next defied all logic. Witnesses described the sun breaking free from the clouds, spinning like a wheel of fire, casting multicolored light across the landscape before plunging toward the earth in a terrifying zigzag motion, only to snap back into place. People fell to their knees, weeping, as soaked clothes dried instantly, and the terrified crowd believed the world was ending. Even secular reporters from Lisbon's anti-religious newspapers confirmed the phenomenon, their accounts matching those of devout pilgrims. The church, initially wary, spent decades investigating before declaring the event worthy of belief. But what could explain such a spectacle? Some scientists suggest mass hallucination triggered by prolonged staring at the sun. Yet how could thousands share the same vision down to the smallest details? Others point to rare atmospheric conditions, though nothing in recorded science matches the sun's reported movements that day. And then there are the children's prophecies, delivered months before the event, predicting not just the miracle but global upheavals that followed, from the rise of dictators to the near annihilation of World War II. Beyond debates of science or faith, Fátima's miracle left an undeniable mark. Pilgrims still flocked to the site, many reporting inexplicable healings. The event blurred the line between the tangible and the transcendent, forcing even hardened minds to ask, was this a divine warning, a call to repentance, or a glimpse into realities beyond our own? One thing certain after that day in Fátima, those who witnessed the dancing sun could never see the world quite the same way again. The story of the Red Sea parting is one of those moments that stretches the boundaries of belief. According to the book of Exodus, Moses, leading the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt, found himself trapped between Pharaoh's charging army and the uncrossable waters. Then, in an act that defied nature, a strong east wind blew all night, splitting the sea in two and creating walls of water on either side, a path straight through the depths. The Israelites marched to safety, but when the Egyptian forces tried to follow, the waters crashed back, swallowing chariots and soldiers whole. Could such an event have really happened? Some historians point to a shallow marshland near the Mediterranean called the Red Sea, suggesting a natural phenomenon like a strong wind could have exposed muddy pathways, allowing escape while bogging down heavy chariots. Others theorize a rare tsunami-like event called a wind set-down, where hurricane force winds temporarily push waters aside, documented in modern times at places like Lake Erie. Archaeologists have even dredged up ancient weapons and chariot wheels from the Red Sea's depths, though skeptics argue these could belong to any number of drowned armies across centuries. Yet beyond the debate of fact or legend lies something even more compelling: the story's enduring power. For 3,000 years, this moment has symbolized liberation, not just of a people but of the human spirit. The image of walls of water looming overhead, of stepping into the unknown with faith as your only guide, resonates across cultures and generations. It's echoed in spirituals sung by enslaved Africans, in art from Renaissance frescoes to Hollywood epics, even in political movements that speak of crossing over into freedom. Perhaps the miracle wasn't just the parting of the waters, but the unshakable belief that carried a people forward when all logic said they were doomed. Whether divine intervention or a twist of nature, the Red Sea's story reminds us that sometimes, against all odds, the impossible becomes the path to survival. And that idea of hope splitting despair like a blade through waves might be the most miraculous thing of all. High on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, where the air hummed with the scent of laurel and burning incense, the ancient world's most revered voice spoke not from a king or philosopher, but from a trembling peasant woman. The Oracle of Delphi, a priestess known as the Pythia, sat atop a three-legged stool above a fissure in the earth, inhaling strange vapors before uttering prophecies that shaped empires. Kings and generals traveled for weeks to kneel before her, desperate for guidance on war, love, and destiny. Her words, often cryptic and riddled with double meanings, decided the fates of nations. When Croesus, the wealthiest man in Greece, asked if he should invade Persia, she famously replied, "If you cross the river Holis, a great empire will fall." He did, and it was his own, but how did an ordinary woman channel such foresight? Modern investigations revealed chilling clues. Geologists discovered two fault lines crossing beneath the temple, releasing ethylene, a sweet-smelling gas known to induce euphoria and trances. In small doses, it creates a dreamlike state; in larger amounts, violent convulsions. The Pythia's stool sat directly over this toxic vent, her rituals timed to coincide with the gas's release. Witness accounts describe her writhing, foaming at the mouth, speaking in guttural tones, symptoms eerily consistent with ethylene exposure. Even the temple's layout amplified the effect: a sunken chamber to concentrate the fumes, a sealing hole to regulate airflow, and a spring laced with lithium to prolong hallucinations. Yet the most haunting question remains: were her prophecies mere chemical delirium or something more? Consider the accuracy. Before the Persian Wars, she warned Athens to trust in wooden walls. They interpreted it as their navy and crushed the invading fleet at Salamis. When Socrates asked his friend Chaerephon to consult the oracle about who was wisest in Athens, her reply, "No one is wiser than Socrates," set him on a path that would redefine philosophy. Too many predictions hit their mark to dismiss as lucky guesses. Perhaps the truth lies in the intersection of science and the sacred. The gases didn't just induce madness. They lowered inhibitions, allowing the Pythia's subconscious to synthesize fragments of political gossip, military intelligence, and human psychology into startling insight. In a world before news networks, she was the ultimate information processor, her poisoned trance a brutal form of genius. Or maybe, as the ancients believed, the gods truly spoke through her cracked lips, using earthly fumes as their microphone. Either way, Delphi's power faded only when Rome's Christian emperors sealed the fissure, silencing the voice that had guided a millennium of history. Today, the temple lies in ruins, but the mystery lingers. Were the oracle's visions divine whispers or toxic delirium? The answer might be both, proof that even the holiest miracles sometimes rise from the cracks of the earth itself. The Shroud of Turin is perhaps the most debated religious artifact in history, a 14-foot-long linen cloth that bears the faint, haunting imprint of a crucified man, complete with wounds matching the biblical accounts of Jesus' suffering. First documented in medieval France, the shroud's origins are shrouded in mystery, with some believers claiming it's the actual burial cloth of Christ, while skeptics dismiss it as an elaborate forgery. The image itself is baffling. No paint, dye, or pigment has ever been detected on the fibers. Instead, the delicate straw-yellow discoloration seems to result from a chemical change in the cloth's surface, as if scorched by some unknown energy. Even more eerily, the image possesses three-dimensional qualities, with darker shades corresponding to areas that would have been closer to the body, details no medieval artist could have known to replicate. In 1988, radiocarbon dating of a small sample placed the shroud's creation between 1260 and 1390, seemingly debunking its authenticity. But controversy erupted almost immediately. Researchers later argued the tested piece came from a medieval repair, not the original fabric. Microscopic analysis revealed plant pollen embedded in the cloth consistent with species from ancient Judea, not Europe. Textile experts pointed out the shroud's herringbone weave matches first-century Jewish burial practices, unknown in the Middle Ages. Even the carbon dating method itself faced scrutiny. Fire damage in 1532 could have skewed results by contaminating the sample with younger carbon isotopes. Art historians have proposed wild theories to explain the image. Could it be the world's first photograph created by Leonardo da Vinci using a camera obscura and a corpse? Unlikely, the shroud predates him by centuries. Others suggest it's a rubbing from a bas-relief sculpture, but no tool marks or pressure lines exist, the most haunting possibility. A burst of radiant energy at the moment of resurrection, searing the cloth with a fleeting snapshot of divine power. Scientists have tried and failed to replicate the shroud's exact properties using lasers, ultraviolet light, and even medieval techniques. Beyond the science lies its spiritual weight. Pilgrims who have stood before the shroud describe an overwhelming sense of presence, as if staring into the eyes of history's most famous martyr. The wounds are horrifically precise, lacerations from a Roman flagrum, a puncture in the wrist where nerves would cause paralysis, even swelling around the cheeks consistent with a brutal beating. For believers, it's not just an artifact, it's a mirror held up to 2,000 years of devotion, a tangible link to the central mystery of their faith. Skeptics see a riddle, but perhaps both can agree. Whether miracle or masterwork, the Shroud of Turin refuses to surrender its secrets easily. And maybe that's the point. Some truths aren't meant to be proven, only pondered in the quiet space between doubt and wonder. Ancient Hindu texts speak of weapons so powerful they could level mountains, boil oceans, and even erase entire bloodlines with a single strike. The Mahabharata, a sprawling epic written over 2,000 years ago, describes these devastating tools of war not as crude blades or arrows, but as celestial gifts from the gods wielded by heroes in an apocalyptic conflict. Take the Brahmastra, for instance, a weapon said to be charged with the power of creation itself. When launched, it produced a pillar of fire brighter than 1,000 suns, shaking the earth and turning sand to glass for miles. Survivors were said to suffer hair loss, burns, and a slow, wasting death, symptoms eerily similar to radiation poisoning. Another weapon, the Pashupatastra, could only be used once in a lifetime as its destruction was absolute. Then there's the Narayanastra, which rained down millions of fiery projectiles, each capable of seeking out and annihilating individual targets. To modern ears, these descriptions sound less like mythology and more like accounts of nuclear war or advanced guided missiles. In fact, when American physicist Robert Oppenheimer witnessed the first atomic bomb test in 1945, he famously quoted the Mahabharata, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." But how could an ancient text describe technology millennia ahead of its time? Some scholars argue these passages are purely symbolic, representing spiritual or psychological warfare. Others point to the so-called Iron Pillar of Delhi, a rust-free metal column dating back to the Gupta Empire, as proof of lost metallurgical knowledge. The most provocative theory, that the Mahabharata preserves fragmented memories of a sophisticated prehistoric civilization, one that mastered energies we've only begun to harness. The epic mentions flying machines called vimanas, detailed with precise dimensions and propulsion systems. It describes battles fought with arrows that could strike distant cities, leaving them lifeless and infertile for years. Even the timing is uncanny. The Mahabharata war is traditionally dated to around 3100 BCE, coinciding with archaeological evidence of sudden urban collapse across the Indus Valley. Of course, skeptics dismiss these parallels as coincidence or creative exaggeration. Yet the precision is unsettling. The Brahmastra's effects mirror modern descriptions of neutron bombs, which minimize structural damage while maximizing human casualties. The Agnyastra, a fire weapon, reportedly created flames that couldn't be quenched, reminiscent of napalm or thermite. And the text's insistence that these weapons were last resorts, forbidden in most combat, suggests an acute awareness of their catastrophic potential. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between myth and memory. The Mahabharata isn't just a tale of war, it's a cautionary saga about the corruption of power and the fragility of civilization. Its celestial weapons may be metaphors for humanity's capacity for self-destruction, warnings encoded in allegory, or maybe, just maybe, they're echoes of a forgotten chapter in our technological history, one where the line between divine power and advanced science blurred beyond recognition. Either way, the epic's haunting visions force us to confront a timeless question. How much of our progress is truly new, and how much have we simply rediscovered from a world long lost to time? In the foothills of the French Pyrenees, where the Gave de Pau River cuts through steep valleys, lies a grotto that has defied medical explanation for over a century and a half. In 1858, a 14-year-old girl named Bernadette Soubirous Poor, asthmatic and illiterate, claimed the Virgin Mary appeared to her 18 times near a dank, muddy spring. During one vision, Bernadette scraped at the earth until water bubbled up, forming what would become the sacred spring of Lourdes. Almost immediately, rumors spread of its miraculous properties. A woman with a paralyzed arm plunged it into the water and emerged healed. A blind man washed his eyes and regained sight. Today, over 7 million pilgrims visit annually, many clutching Roman IV poles or wheeling oxygen tanks, desperate for relief where medicine has failed. But what makes Lourdes unique isn't just the sheer volume of claims, it's the Church's obsessive scrutiny of them. Unlike fleeting apparitions or emotional conversions, healings here face a gauntlet of verification that would challenge any clinical trial. The Lourdes Medical Bureau, staffed by skeptical doctors of all faiths and none, operates like a divine courtroom. To even be considered, a healing must meet 5 brutal criteria. The ailment must be serious, well-documented, incurable by modern science, show sudden and lasting recovery, and defy natural explanations. Out of 7,000 reported cases since 1858, only 70 have been officially recognized. Take the case of Vittorio Micheli. In 1963, this Italian soldier's hip bone was so ravaged by cancer that his leg dangled uselessly. his pelvis reduced to Gruyere cheese on X-rays. After immersion in Lourdes waters, his pain vanished overnight. Within months, his hip regenerated, an impossibility with osteosarcoma. Another case involves a French nun, Sister Marie Simon-Pierre, whose advanced Parkinson's left her unable to walk or write. Post-pilgrimage, her tremors stopped mid-meal, her handwriting steadied, and brain scans showed no trace of the disease. Neurologists who examined her admitted they'd never seen such a reversal. Yet for every verified miracle, there are thousands of unanswered prayers. Pilgrims with terminal illnesses drink the water and still die. Children with congenital disorders leave unhealed. This duality fuels the controversy. Scientists propose placebo effects, psychosomatic relief, or spontaneous remissions, rare but documented in medical literature. Critics highlight that most miracles involve conditions like tuberculosis or paralysis, which can have sudden recoveries rather than regrown limbs or vanished genetic defects. Even the Bureau acknowledges that faith, not the water itself, may trigger physiological changes science doesn't yet understand. The grotto's true power might lie beyond mere biology. Spend an hour watching pilgrims bathe in the icy pools, and you'll witness something raw and human, not just desperation but solidarity. Millionaires and refugees kneel side by side. Atheist doctors volunteer at the baths, moved not by belief but by the sheer force of hope. Whether the healings are divine or deeply human, Lourdes forces a confrontation with the limits of our knowledge. In a world where we map genomes and manipulate atoms, it dares us to explain why some prayers seem answered against all odds, and why so many others echo into silence. Perhaps the real miracle isn't the vanishing tumors or restored sight, but the unshakable persistence of hope in the face of suffering. After all, the spring Bernadette uncovered was never promised to cure everyone, only to reveal, in her words, a light no darkness can match. And in that sense, Lourdes' mystery endures not because it gives answers, but because it keeps us asking. The Ark of the Covenant wasn't just a religious relic, it was a weapon, a conduit of divine power, and one of history's most sought-after treasures. According to the Book of Exodus, this gold-plated chest, built to hold the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments, radiated such raw energy that touching it meant instant death. Priests carried it on long poles, wrapped in layers of protective cloth, because even its proximity could strike down the unworthy. When the Israelites marched into battle, the Ark led the charge, toppling city walls and scattering enemies like leaves in a storm. But around 586 BC, after the Babylonians sacked Jerusalem, the Ark vanished without a trace, igniting a mystery that's fueled quests, wars, and wild theories for millennia. One persistent legend claims it rests in Ethiopia, hidden within the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Axum, where a single monk guards it for life, forbidden to speak of what he's seen. The story traces back to Menelik I, the supposed son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, who allegedly smuggled the Ark to Africa. Pilgrims flocked to Axum, convinced its presence explains why no other nation has ever successfully invaded Ethiopia. But without physical proof, no one outside the monastery's inner circle is allowed near it. The claim remains tantalizing folklore. Other theories point to secret tunnels beneath Jerusalem's Temple Mount. Medieval knights of the Templar Order supposedly excavated beneath the ruins of Solomon's Temple during the Crusades, unearthing artifacts that granted them sudden wealth and influence. Some believe they found the Ark and spirited it to Europe, where it may still lie in a forgotten crypt beneath a French cathedral or Swiss mountain. Modern archaeologists using ground-penetrating radar have mapped vast subterranean chambers under the mount, but political tensions prevent full exploration. Then there's the possibility it was destroyed, melted down by Babylonian looters, or decayed in some forgotten cave. But the most chilling hypothesis comes from the Book of Jeremiah, which suggests the Ark won't be found because it was never meant to be recovered. The text cryptically states it will not come to mind or be remembered until a future time of divine reckoning. What makes the ark's disappearance so compelling isn't just its biblical significance, it's the enduring reports of its power. In 1982, a team of Israeli archaeologists investigating a site near the Dead Sea claimed their equipment malfunctioned near a chamber rumored to hold sacred objects, their Geiger counters spiking inexplicably. Even today, visitors to Axum describe strange electromagnetic disturbances near the church, as if the air itself is charged with something beyond understanding. Whether relic or legend, the ark's legacy endures because it represents the ultimate collision of faith and force, a tangible link between the divine and the destructive. Its absence taunts us with questions. If it's found, would it unite the world or unleash chaos? Would it be a blessing or a curse? Perhaps its greatest power lies not in where it is, but in the unshakable hold it still has on our imagination, centuries after its last confirmed sighting. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, they're meant to keep us searching, questioning, and marveling at the thin veil between history and holy wonder. On an ordinary September morning in 1995, news flashed across India like wildfire. Stone deities were drinking milk. In Calcutta, devotees lined up by the thousands, holding spoons of milk to the mouths of statues representing gods like Ganesh and Shiva. To their astonishment, the milk disappeared as if the idols were sipping it through unseen lips. Within hours, the phenomenon spread to temples across the country and even overseas from New York to London. Scientists scrambled to explain the reports while believers declared it a divine miracle. Eyewitness accounts varied wildly. Some described the milk vanishing instantly, pooling at the base of the idols as if absorbed. Others swore they saw it trickling down the statues' throats. Television crews captured chaotic scenes, crowds shoving to get closer, priests chanting, skeptics shaking their heads. The Indian Rationalist Association wasted no time debunking the claims, demonstrating how surface tension could make milk appear to vanish when tilted against smooth stone. Yet for every scientist shouting capillary action, there were 100 devotees whispering divine intervention. The psychological dimension was just as fascinating. Psychologists pointed to mass hysteria, a collective delusion fueled by suggestibility and cultural reverence. In a country where faith blurs seamlessly into daily life, the idea of gods manifesting wasn't just plausible, it was electrifying. The timing amplified the fervor. September 21st marked the start of Ganesh Chaturthi, a festival celebrating the elephant-headed god's birth. For believers, the timing couldn't be coincidence. Was this a sign of blessing, a wake-up call to a society drifting from tradition? But beneath the frenzy lay an unshakable truth: faith defies measurement. To skeptics, the milk miracle was a textbook case of confirmation bias. People saw what they wanted to see. Yet for those who felt the spoon go light in their hands, no scientific explanation could erase the awe of that moment. Temples reported record donations in the aftermath, a tidal wave of devotion sparked by an event that lasted barely 48 hours before abruptly ending. The statues never drank milk again, but the legacy of that September lingers not as proof of the divine, but as a mirror held up to human longing. In a world increasingly governed by data and skepticism, the milk miracle revealed how desperately we crave the extraordinary, the inexplicable. Whether trick of physics or touch of the gods, it reminded millions that wonder still exists, and sometimes that's miracle enough. The story of Lazarus begins in a small village just outside Jerusalem, where a man lies dead in a tomb, not for hours but for 4 full days. His sisters, Mary and Martha, are deep in mourning when Jesus arrives and makes a claim so shocking it defies belief: "Your brother will rise again." Then, standing before the sealed tomb, he shouts a simple command: "Lazarus, come out." And a man wrapped in burial cloth staggers into the light, alive. To understand the gravity of this moment, consider 1st-century Jewish burial customs. After death, bodies were washed, anointed with spices, and tightly wrapped in linen strips. By the fourth day, decomposition would have set in visibly, hence Martha's horrified protest when Jesus orders the stone rolled away. "Lord, by this time there will be a stench." This wasn't a case of mistaken death or a coma. Those who witnessed Lazarus's return describe a corpse reanimated, a reversal of decay itself. Yet medical history offers eerie parallels. Take the phenomenon of apparent death, a state where vital signs become undetectable by primitive methods. In 19th century Europe, fear of premature burial led to safety coffins equipped with bells and breathing tubes. Modern medicine recognizes conditions like catalepsy, a trance-like rigidity mimicking death, or hypothermia, where patients with no pulse can revive after hours. There's even the rare Lazarus syndrome, where failed resuscitation attempts suddenly result in spontaneous circulation returning minutes after being declared futile. Could Lazarus have been a first-century case of such a phenomenon? Theological interpretations push further. In Jewish tradition, the soul was believed to linger near the body for 3 days before departing, making Jesus' 4-day delay a deliberate demonstration of power over even the irrevocable. Early Christians saw Lazarus' resurrection as a precursor to Christ's own, a proof of divine authority over death's grip. But skeptics counter that if Lazarus truly returned from biological death, why does history record no second deathbed? The Bible falls silent on his later life, fueling speculation that his revival may have been temporary, a supernatural resuscitation rather than eternal resurrection. Perhaps the most haunting question isn't how Lazarus walked out of that tomb, but why. Unlike other miracles, this one carries a chilling intimacy. Jesus weeps before performing it, his humanity and divinity colliding in raw emotion. Some scholars suggest the miracle was less about Lazarus and more for his grieving sisters, a tangible comfort in their despair. Others see it as the final provocation that sealed Jesus' fate with religious authorities, who reportedly plotted to kill Lazarus again to suppress the evidence. Between faith and science, the story leaves us suspended in mystery. Medical explanations stretch but cannot snap the thread of a 4-day decomposition reversed. Spiritual interpretations acknowledge the unnerving silence around Lazarus's post-resurrection life. What remains is a narrative that has gripped imaginations for 2,000 years, not just as a display of power, but as an unsettling glimpse into the boundary between life and death, where even the most unyielding laws of nature might, for a moment, bend. The summer of 1914 was a season of unimaginable horror for the soldiers of the British Expeditionary Force. Trapped in the muddy trenches of Mons, Belgium, outnumbered and outgunned by the advancing German army, they braced for annihilation. Then, as the skies darkened over the battlefield, something extraordinary happened. Men from multiple regiments swore they saw spectral bowmen materializing from the mist, long-dead warriors from Agincourt raining arrows down on the enemy. Others described towering, luminous figures with outstretched wings standing between them and certain death, their swords flashing like lightning. By the time the smoke cleared, rumors spread that divine intervention had spared the British forces, giving birth to the legend of the Angel of Mons. Was this a miracle, a mass hallucination, or something even stranger? The timing is telling. The battle occurred during the war's earliest, most desperate days, when propaganda machines were hungry for hope. Newspapers like the Evening News published fictionalized accounts of angelic rescues, blurring the line between fact and folklore. Yet the sheer volume of first-hand testimonies is striking. A lieutenant reported his men refusing to fire at a column of advancing Germans because there was a tall, shining figure between us. A private described an otherworldly voice urging him to hold his position moments before a shell obliterated the spot he'd considered fleeing to. Even German prisoners later spoke of inexplicable phantom archers disrupting their advance. Psychologists point to the mind's ability to conjure salvation under extreme stress, a phenomenon called battlefield vision. During life or death crises, the brain can flood with endorphins and dopamine, triggering vivid, dreamlike hallucinations. World War I's relentless artillery barrages and sleep deprivation only heightened this effect. But why would hundreds of men envision the same specific imagery? Folklorists trace the angel and archer motifs to England's cultural memory, where tales of St. George and Agincourt's longbowmen were national mythology. In moments of terror, perhaps soldiers latched onto these symbols as psychological armor, yet skeptics face stubborn gaps. How could exhausted, shell-shocked men, many unfamiliar with each other, provide such eerily consistent details? Why did multiple German accounts corroborate the unnatural light on the battlefield? And most hauntingly, why did some survivors' later sketches of the angels match medieval depictions almost exactly? The British military, wary of superstition undermining discipline, quietly dismissed the reports, but privately, even officers admitted the battle's outcome defied tactical logic. The Angel of Mons endures because it lives in the liminal space between faith and fear, where history and mystery collide. For some, it's proof that in war's darkest hour, the divine intervenes. For others, it's a testament to the human spirit's ability to forge hope from despair. Either way, the legend whispers a chilling question: when death looms, do we see what we believe or believe what we see? That foggy August night left behind no photographs, no physical evidence, only stories passed between trembling lips, a ghostly echo of the inexplicable that still lingers over Mons today. The doctrine of the Immaculate Conception stands as one of Catholicism's most profound and misunderstood mysteries. Unlike the virgin birth of Jesus, which refers to Christ's conception without human fatherhood, this teaching centers on his mother, Mary, and the belief that she was conceived free from original sin. The idea wasn't formally defined as dogma until 1854, when Pope Pius IX declared it revealed by God, but its roots stretch back to the early church's wrestling with a paradoxical question: how could a vessel carrying divinity be touched by humanity's fallen nature? Ancient Christians grappled with this tension through vivid metaphors. Church fathers like Saint Ephrem the Syrian in the 4th century compared Mary to a spotless mirror reflecting divine light, while medieval theologians envisioned her as the new Eve, whose obedience untangled the knot of Eve's disobedience. By the 12th century, thinkers like Saint Bernard of Clairvaux argued that Mary's sanctification must have occurred at some point, whether at her birth, her own conception, or even at the Annunciation. But the debate reached a fever pitch during the Renaissance, when Franciscan and Dominican scholars clashed over whether this privilege undermined Christ's role as universal Redeemer. If Mary needed no saving, how could he be Savior of all? The resolution came through a theological sleight of hand. Mary was preserved from sin by a preemptive application of Christ's grace, saved in advance, as it were, through the merits of the crucifixion that hadn't yet happened in earthly time. This formulation allowed the Church to uphold both her uniqueness and Christ's centrality. The imagery surrounding the dogma is equally rich. In art, Mary often appears standing atop a crescent moon, crushing the serpent of Eden underfoot, a direct visual link to the Immaculate Conception's promise of triumph over sin's legacy. Yet outside Catholicism, reactions range from skepticism to outright rejection. Eastern Orthodoxy reveres Mary as Panagia, all holy, but avoids the Immaculate Conception as an overly legalistic framing of holiness, preferring to speak of her lifelong purification through cooperation with God's will. Most Protestant reformers, including Martin Luther in his early writings, acknowledged Mary's purity but rejected the doctrine as unbiblical, arguing that St. Paul's assertion that all have sinned leaves no exceptions. Even among Catholics, the dogma's implications spark debate. Does it elevate Mary to near-divine status, or does it highlight humanity's potential when fully open to grace? The doctrine's cultural impact defies easy measure. From the rose windows of Gothic cathedrals to the millions who pray the Immaculate Mary hymn at Lourdes, It shaped devotion in ways both grand and intimate. Modern feminists wrestle with its legacy. Does a sinless Mary make her a feminist icon of untainted agency, or an impossible standard used to police women's bodies? Psychologists note how the imagery of purity resonates with universal human longings for innocence regained. Perhaps the Immaculate Conception's deepest power lies in its audacity. In declaring that one mortal's origin story could brush against eternity, Catholicism dared to imagine a humanity capable of bearing the divine without fracture. Whether accepted as literal truth or symbolic ideal, the dogma invites a startling possibility. That holiness might not be the absence of struggle, but the presence of a light no darkness could touch. And in a world haunted by brokenness, that idea alone, whether miracle or metaphor, can feel like its own kind of revelation. In the early 2000s, an unusual deity appeared on the internet, one with noodly appendages, meatball eyes, and a penchant for pirate regalia. The Flying Spaghetti Monster began as a satirical letter penned by physics graduate Bobby Henderson, protesting the inclusion of intelligent design alongside evolution in Kansas public schools. His argument was deliciously absurd. If schools taught alternate theories, they should also teach that the universe was created by an invisible, carb-based God who manipulated scientific data with his noodly touch. What started as a joke soon boiled over into a global phenomenon, challenging the boundaries between faith, parody, and the law. At its core, Pastafarianism, the mock religion born from Henderson's invention, holds up a funhouse mirror to organized belief systems. Adherents jokingly claim to worship the Flying Spaghetti Monster, wear colanders as religious headgear, and celebrate holidays like Passover. Yet beneath the laughter lies a razor-sharp critique. By adopting the trappings of real religions, dogma, rituals, even ordained ministers, Pastafarians highlight how arbitrary some sacred traditions can appear to outsiders. When Dutch courts ruled in 2016 that colander wearing wasn't a legitimate expression of faith for driver's license photos, it forced an uncomfortable question: who gets to decide what counts as real religion? The movement's most surprising twist: it's been weaponized in genuine legal battles. In Poland, a Pastafarian successfully argued for the right to wear a colander in his ID photo, citing religious freedom. New Zealand granted the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster charitable status in 2016, while Austrian courts recognized it as a world-view equivalent to other beliefs. These victories aren't just about posture, they're about the principle that faith, no matter how ridiculous it seems, shouldn't be subject to government approval. Of course, not everyone finds the satire appetizing. Critics accuse Pastafarians of mocking deeply held convictions, reducing centuries of theology to a punchline. Some religious scholars argue that while parody religions expose hypocrisy, they risk trivializing the human need for meaning. Yet even these tensions serve a purpose. The Flying Spaghetti Monster invites us to laugh at the absurdities of belief while defending the right to believe or not believe without interference. Perhaps the real miracle of this meatball-clad deity is how it's evolved beyond its original punchline. What began as a protest against bad science education has become a mirror held up to culture wars, showing how quickly the lines between sacred and silly can tangle. Whether you see it as heresy or harmless fun, the Flying Spaghetti Monster's legacy is undeniable. In a world where faith and freedom constantly collide, sometimes the best way to question power is to do it with a wink and a fork. In the quiet Italian town of Lanciano around the year 700, a priest wrestling with doubts about his faith experienced something that would echo through the centuries. During Mass, as he recited the words of consecration, "This is my body, this is my blood," the sacramental bread in his hands suddenly transformed into what appeared to be human flesh, while the wine thickened into globules of blood. Shock rippled through the small congregation, but unlike fleeting miracles, this one didn't fade. The flesh remained, preserved on a paten, and the blood congealed into 5 irregular pellets, each varying in size and shape. For over 1,200 years, these relics have been displayed in Lanciano's Church of St. Francis, drawing pilgrims eager to witness what science and faith alike struggle to explain. What makes this miracle unique isn't just its antiquity, it's the startling forensic evidence. In 1970, Dr. Edoardo Linoli, a professor of anatomy and pathology, was granted rare permission to analyze the samples. His findings, published in the Italian medical journal Quaderni Sclavo di Diagnostica Clinica, defy easy dismissal. The flesh, he confirmed, was striated cardiac tissue from a human heart, complete with intact arterial structures. The blood type matched across all 5 pellets, AB, the same rare group later found on the Shroud of Turin and in most documented Eucharistic miracles. Microscopic analysis revealed no traces of preservatives, yet the tissues showed no signs of decomposition despite centuries of exposure. Even more baffling, the blood samples contained proteins and minerals in proportions typical of fresh blood, yet they'd never decayed or crystallized. Skeptics proposed theories ancient fungi mimicking flesh, elaborate medieval hoaxes, but none account for the biological precision. The miracle's endurance shapes Lanciano's identity. Every October, the town celebrates the feast of the Eucharistic miracle with processions where the relics are paraded through, streets strewn with flowers. Pilgrims describe an uncanny sense of presence when near the relics, as if standing at the threshold of the inexplicable. The local archdiocese avoids hyperbolic claims, emphasizing the event's role as a mystery of faith rather than a spectacle. Yet the Church's tacit endorsement speaks volumes. The Vatican's Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith has included Lanciano in its official register of recognized Eucharistic miracles since the 1600s. Scientifically, the flesh and blood of Lanciano pose provocative questions. How could cardiac tissue maintain its structure without artificial preservation? Why does the blood type AB appear so consistently in phenomena spanning continents and centuries? Some researchers speculate about unknown natural processes or even quantum-level changes in molecular structure, though these remain speculative. Believers see divine craftsmanship, a literal embodiment of Christ's promise at the Last Supper. The tension between these views, empirical and spiritual, fuels Lanciano's power as a crossroads of wonder. Beyond debates, the miracle's deepest impact may be personal. Modern visitors, whether devout or doubtful, often leave with the same unsettled awe reported by medieval pilgrims. There's something undeniably humbling about confronting an object that defies category. Neither fully artifact nor relic, neither fully of this world nor entirely beyond it. Perhaps that's the point. Miracles like Lanciano aren't meant to convince but to confront, to whisper that even in an age of microscopes and satellites, some mysteries refuse to be solved, only witnessed. And in that space between knowing and unknowing, faith finds its most fertile ground. In the winter of 1425, a 17-year-old peasant girl stood trial for heresy in a cold Rowan courtroom, her fate hanging on a single explosive claim that God himself had spoken to her. Joan of Arc, an illiterate farmer's daughter from Domremy, had become the unlikely military savior of France, leading armies to victory against the English during the 100 Years' War, all because she insisted celestial voices guided her every move. From the age of 13, Joan reported visions of Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, and Saint Margaret, their words blazing in her mind with such clarity, she could describe their crowns and robes in vivid detail. They commanded her to dress as a man, take up arms, and crown the Dauphin Charles as rightful king. Against all odds, she did exactly that, but what lay behind these divine messages? Modern neurologists propose fascinating explanations. Temporal lobe epilepsy, known to trigger intense religious hallucinations, aligns with Joan's description of flashing lights and disembodied voices. Migraine auras could account for her vision's luminous quality, while carbon monoxide poisoning from childhood exposure to household hearths might explain recurring episodes. Yet these theories stumble on one key detail. Joan's voices didn't just inspire piety, they delivered precise military counsel. At the Siege of Orleans, she allegedly predicted exactly where English forces would retreat weeks in advance. Before the Battle of Patay, she instructed troops to abandon their planned position, a move that secured a crushing victory. Could neurological anomalies alone explain such tactical genius in an untrained teenager? Joan's legacy fractures along lines of belief. To the church that later canonized her, she's proof of divine intervention, a vessel chosen for a sacred mission. Secular historians often frame her as a shrewd political pawn, her visions possibly coached by clergy sympathetic to Charles' cause. Feminists reclaim her as a proto-revolutionary who shattered medieval gender norms. Her male attire and battlefield command a defiant rejection of patriarchal limits. Even her trial transcripts reveal uncanny intelligence. When interrogators demanded proof of her voice's divinity, she shot back, "If I tell you, would you believe me?" A rhetorical parry that left theologians speechless. Her execution at 19 only amplified her myth. Burned at the stake as a heretic, her heart reportedly survived the flames unsinged, a detail the church later cited as miraculous. Within decades, the same institution that condemned her declared her innocent, then sainted her. Today, Joan's name adorns warships, universities, and even space probes, a testament to how her story transcends time. Whether divinely chosen or brilliantly unhinged, she remains humanity's most haunting case study in the power of conviction and the price of challenging what a society deems possible. In the end, perhaps the truest miracle wasn't the voices Joan heard, but the fact that an illiterate girl forced kings and empires to listen. A shepherd's ordinary day at the foot of Mount Horeb erupted into the extraordinary when Moses spotted a bush engulfed in flames, yet somehow not consumed by the fire. As he stepped closer, a voice thundered from the blaze, commanding him to remove his sandals on holy ground and announcing divine plans to liberate the Israelites from Egypt. This moment, etched into Exodus chapter 3, has fueled theological debates and botanical investigations for millennia. Was this a literal manifestation of God, a natural phenomenon misinterpreted as supernatural, or something straddling both worlds? Botanists point to a real plant that might explain the spectacle, Dictamnus albus, commonly called the burning bush. Native to the Sinai Peninsula, this shrub secretes volatile oils that can ignite spontaneously in extreme heat, creating a brief, mesmerizing flame without harming the plant. Ancient travelers' accounts describe entire hillsides of Dictamnus appearing to burn under the desert sun, a phenomenon still observed today. Could Moses have encountered such a plant, its chemical fire serving as a visual magnet for a deeper revelation? Yet the biblical account defies purely scientific explanations. The voice from the bush knew Moses by name, delivered specific prophecies about Egypt's plagues, and revealed the sacred name Yahweh, I am who I am, a theological cornerstone of Judaism. The fire didn't just burn, it spoke, issuing commands that altered history. Even more puzzling, the bush's location was significant enough for Moses to mark it as holy ground. Yet its exact site remains lost to time, as if the encounter existed outside geography. Theologians argue the bush's paradox, burning without being consumed, symbolizes God's presence, intense enough to transform, yet never destructive. Early Christian mystics saw it as a prefiguration of Mary's virginity, burning with divine light but untouched, while Kabbalistic texts interpret the flames as layers of spiritual reality. Modern physicists even draw parallels to quantum energy states, where particles exhibit properties of both stability and change. Perhaps the miracle lies in the convergence of nature and the numinous. A flammable plant might have anchored the moment in the tangible world, while the voice from the flames tapped into something beyond material logic. Moses' response, turning aside to investigate, suggests curiosity as the gateway to revelation. The burning bush didn't just command, it invited, proving that the divine sometimes speaks through the marriage of the ordinary and the inexplicable. Whether chemistry or celestial intervention, one truth remains: that flickering fire on the mountainside ignited a revolution in faith that still burns today. Tears streaming down the face of a statue, silent, shimmering, and utterly inexplicable. From a small Sicilian convent to a home altar in Argentina, reports of weeping Marian statues span centuries and continents, blurring the line between miracle and mystery. In 1995, a ceramic Madonna in a Tokyo church allegedly shed tears that tested as human tears, drawing crowds until the archdiocese removed it for investigation. In 2003, a resin icon in Chicago wept what seemed to be rose-scented oil, leaving scientists baffled when chromatography revealed no known perfume compounds. Yet for every unexplained case, others crumble under scrutiny. A famous, weeping statue in New Jersey was exposed when officials found hidden tubes and reservoirs of oil. Another in Mexico wept only when a specific priest was present, later caught refilling the eyes with a syringe. What separates hoax from potential wonder? Forensic analysis provides clues. Authentic cases often involve tears with biochemical profiles matching human emotions, saltwater with proteins like lysozyme, the same enzyme found in distress-induced crying. Some statues exude oils historically used in church rituals, like rose or myrrh, but without any detectable source or mechanism. The most baffling instances defy physics: tears flowing upward against gravity, or statues weeping blood that shares the rare AB blood group tied to other Eucharistic miracles. Skeptics argue capillary action can draw moisture through porous materials, yet this fails to explain how sealed marble or glass eyes produce liquid. Even temperature shifts, often blamed for condensation, don't account for tears that pool in specific patterns or contain organic material. The psychological dimension runs just as deep. Witnesses, often hardened skeptics, describe an uncanny weight to these moments. A nurse in Naples who volunteered at a hospital chapel swore she saw a plaster Madonna's tears change trajectory mid-fall, as if guided. A forensic photographer in Portugal captured droplets on a statue's cheeks, only to discover the liquid vanished from his developed film. These accounts share eerie consistencies. The tears often appear during times of local crisis wars, natural disasters, or on significant feast days. Some believers interpret them as warnings, others as comfort. The Vatican treads carefully, recognizing fewer than a dozen weeping statue cases in modern history despite thousands of claims. Perhaps the most haunting case comes from Syracuse, Sicily, in 1953. A humble plaster Madonna wept for 4 days straight, her tears filling glass vials that still hang near the statue today. Scientific analysis by Italy's highest medical council confirmed the liquid was human tears, with a chemical signature identical to those produced under extreme grief. Yet no pipes, no reservoirs, no evidence of tampering was ever found. The bishop, initially skeptical, became a fervent advocate after witnessing tears well up in real time. Even more unsettling, the tears stopped abruptly on the 4th day, just as mysteriously as they began. Whether divine signal or psychological phenomenon, weeping statues tap into something primal, the human need to see the sacred grieve alongside us. In a world where suffering often feels met with silence, the idea that a mother's sorrow might manifest in plaster and paint offers a fragile, flickering hope. Science may one day explain the mechanics, but the deeper question lingers. Why do these visions of sorrow resonate so universally? Maybe because tears, real or imagined, remain the one language every culture understands without translation. The Holy Grail isn't just an artifact, it's an idea that has haunted the Western imagination for centuries, shifting shape between sacred relic and literary symbol depending on who's telling the tale. In its simplest form, the Grail is said to be the cup used by Christ at the Last Supper, later catching drops of his blood at the crucifixion. But this vessel quickly spiraled into something far grander. Medieval romances like Chrétien de Troyes' Percival transformed it into a shimmering, otherworldly object guarded by a wounded king in a hidden castle, capable of granting eternal youth or unlimited sustenance. By the time Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur wove it into Arthurian legend, the Grail had become a test of purity accessible only to the most virtuous knight Galahad, while leaving even Lancelot yearning at a distance. What's fascinating, though, is how the Grail's meaning mutates across cultures. In Celtic myth, it echoes the magical cauldrons of Bran the Blessed or Dagda, objects that could resurrect the dead or feed armies. Alchemists of the Renaissance saw it as a metaphor for the philosopher's stone, a vessel of transformation. Fast forward to the 19th century, and Wagner's opera Parsifal reframed it as a symbol of divine grace, its power tied to compassion rather than conquest. And let's not forget Indiana Jones sprinting through booby-trapped temples to prevent the Nazis from harnessing its immortality, a proof of how effortlessly the Grail slides between history and Hollywood. But could such an object exist? The contenders are tantalizing. Valencia Cathedral claims to safeguard the actual holy chalice, a simple agate cup dated to the 1st century, while Genoa's Sacro Catino, a green glass dish, was once believed to be the Grail until carbon dating placed it in the 9th century. Then there's the mysterious Nantio's cup, a wooden fragment in Wales said to heal the sick, though scientists confirmed it was likely a medieval mazer bowl. The Knights Templar, often linked to Grail lore, allegedly hid it beneath Rosslyn Chapel or smuggled it to rural France, sparking endless treasure hunts. Yet for all the searches, the Grail's true power might lie in its elusiveness. Psychologist Carl Jung viewed it as an archetype of the soul's quest, an unreachable ideal that drives humanity forward. T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland paints a world spiritually parched, desperately needing the Grail's return to restore meaning. Even Monty Python's absurdist take, where knights bicker over shrubberies, underscores how the pursuit often eclipses the prize. Whether cup, metaphor, or mirage, the Grail endures because it asks the same question in every era. Is the sacred something we find, or is it the search itself that makes us whole? Perhaps that's why, after centuries of failed quests, the legend still burns bright. The Grail isn't just an object to possess, it's a mirror reflecting what we value most: immortality, redemption, or simply the courage to keep looking when the path disappears. And in that sense, the real miracle isn't whether it exists, but that we never stop believing it might. On a quiet September morning in 1918, an Italian Capuchin friar named Padre Pio knelt in prayer when a searing pain suddenly pierced his hands. Blood began to well up from wounds that appeared spontaneously, not clean cuts, but ragged holes mirroring the crucifixion injuries of Christ. Within days, similar wounds opened in his feet and side, marking the start of a phenomenon that would both fascinate and divide the world for decades. Padre Pio's stigmata weren't fleeting. They remained open, bleeding intermittently for 50 years until his death in 1968, defying every medical explanation. Doctors who examined the wounds were baffled. Unlike typical injuries, Padre Pio's stigmata never became infected, never healed, and strangely, emitted not the metallic scent of blood but what witnesses described as a fragrance of flowers. Renowned pathologist Dr. Giorgio Festa, initially skeptical, conducted multiple examinations and found no signs of self-infliction. The wounds penetrated completely through his hands, yet Padre Pio retained full use of his fingers, an anatomical impossibility if the damage were natural. Even more perplexing, the blood flow followed no physiological pattern. On some days it trickled slowly, on others it stopped abruptly, only to resume during moments of deep prayer or spiritual ecstasy. Skeptics proposed theories ranging from covert self-mutilation to psychosomatic manifestation. Freudian psychologists suggested the wounds resulted from religious hysteria, a subconscious imitation of Christ's suffering fueled by intense devotion. Others pointed to the power of suggestion, noting that Padre Pio had long venerated stigmatic saints like Saint Francis of Assisi, yet these arguments falter under scrutiny. Multiple witnesses, including hostile observers, attested that the wounds appeared suddenly, with no prior marks or signs of tampering. Even under round-the-clock surveillance imposed by Vatican investigators suspicious of potential fraud, the stigmata persisted, unaltered by human intervention. The spiritual implications sparked even fiercer debate. For believers, Padre Pio's wounds were a living testament to divine grace, a tangible connection to Christ's passion. Pilgrims flocked to his monastery in San Giovanni Rotondo, many claiming they felt an inexplicable warmth or peace in his presence. Some reported scenting the same floral aroma that clung to his wounds, a phenomenon later termed the odor of sanctity. The Vatican, wary of sensationalism, initially restricted his ministry, but as healings and conversions multiplied among those who met him, even church skeptics grew uneasy, dismissing the phenomenon outright. Modern science offers scant clarity. Cases of psychogenic stigmata are documented rare instances where intense psychological states manifest as physical symptoms, but none match the duration, specificity, or lack of infection seen in Padre Pio. Some researchers speculate about psychokinetic abilities, where the mind might influence the body in ways science can't yet explain. Others propose that extreme states of meditation or prayer could trigger localized changes in blood flow and tissue permeability, though this remains speculative. Beyond the medical mystery, Padre Pio's stigmata force a deeper question. What does it mean to bear another's suffering? His wounds weren't just a spectacle, they came with agonizing pain he described as a fire from within. Yet instead of seeking relief, he offered his suffering for others, a concept central to Catholic mysticism. Whether divine or deeply human in origin, the stigmata of Padre Pio blur the line between physical and spiritual reality, leaving us to wonder if some wounds aren't meant to be explained, only witnessed. And in that tension between faith and science, his legacy endures, a silent challenge to our understanding of the body's limits and the soul's mysteries. The plagues of Egypt stand as one of history's most dramatic confrontations between divine power and human arrogance, but peel back the layers, and you'll find a fascinating collision of theology and natural phenomena. According to the Book of Exodus, 10 calamities descended upon Egypt, each escalating in severity. Water turning to blood, frogs swarming palaces, locusts devouring crops, all culminating in the chilling death of every firstborn son. At face value, it's a tale of supernatural wrath, yet modern science reveals eerie parallels between these ancient afflictions and environmental disasters still witnessed today. Take the first plague, the Nile's waters transformed into blood. Satellite imagery of modern-day Egypt shows seasonal algal blooms, like those caused by the organism Oscillatoria rubescens, which can turn entire stretches of river a deep, blood-like red. These blooms deplete oxygen, killing fish and fouling water exactly as described in Exodus. Even the subsequent plague, frogs fleeing the toxic water in droves, fits this chain of events, as amphibians abandon polluted habitats in mass migrations. Locust swarms, the 8th plague, remain a grim reality in Africa, with billions of insects darkening skies and stripping fields bare, just as Pharaoh's priests witnessed. But the plagues weren't just random misfortunes, they were meticulously targeted, each struck at the heart of Egyptian divinity. The Nile, worshipped as the god Hapi, became a source of death. Frogs, associated with the fertility goddess Hecate, overran homes as a grotesque parody of abundance. Even the sun god Ra was humiliated when darkness, the 9th plague, blotted out his light. The message was clear: the gods of Egypt were powerless before the God of the enslaved Hebrews. The theological weight of the plagues extends beyond spectacle. They framed liberation as an act of cosmic justice, dismantling the myth of Pharaoh's divine kingship. When Moses demanded, "Let my people go," it wasn't just a plea, it was a divine ultimatum exposing the fragility of human power. The final plague, the death of the firstborn, carried haunting symbolism. Egypt's oppression had stolen the futures of Hebrew children. Now the tables were turned. Yet skeptics argue the plague sequence mirrors a domino effect of ecological collapse: algae poisoning water, driving frogs inland, then dying en masse to attract lice and flies, which spread disease to livestock. The infamous hail of fire, volcanic eruptions like Santorini's in 1600 BC, could have sparked electrical storms, mixing ice and lightning. Even the darkness could stem from Khomsin dust storms, which still shroud Egypt in impenetrable blackness for days. The plague's legacy endures because they operate on dual levels, as both natural calamity and sacred sign. Whether read as divine intervention or ecological parable, their core truth remains: systems built on oppression carry the seeds of their own undoing. The Nile's life-giving waters could turn to poison. The mightiest empire could crumble under the weight of its own arrogance, and perhaps that's the ultimate lesson, not just for Pharaoh, but for every power that mistakes dominance for invincibility. On a sweltering afternoon in 1856, deep within the Dakshineswar Kali temple near Kolkata, a young priest named Ramakrishna collapsed to the stone floor, his body rigid, his breath shallow, eyes wide open but seeing far beyond the temple walls. For hours, witnesses swore his skin glowed with an unearthly radiance, his lips moving in silent communion with something invisible. When he finally stirred, his words sent chills through those gathered. "I have tasted the ocean," he whispered. It is all one. Ramakrishna's ecstatic visions weren't isolated incidents. Over decades, this Hindu mystic documented repeated encounters with the divine so visceral, they blurred the line between physical and spiritual reality. He described merging into a boundless ocean of light, becoming indistinguishable from the goddess Kali herself, even experiencing Christ's crucifixion as if the nails pierced his own flesh. His accounts, meticulously recorded by disciples, read like a roadmap to transcendence, states where time dissolved, the ego evaporated, and the senses flooded with colors and sounds no mortal tongue could name. Modern neuroscience offers a startling lens to examine these experiences. Studies on meditators and epileptic patients reveal that temporal lobe stimulation can induce overwhelming sensations of unity and sacred presence, what psychologists call self-transcendent experiences. Functional MRI scans of advanced yogis show decreased activity in the parietal lobe, the brain's GPS that creates our sense of spatial boundaries. When this region quiets, the illusion of separation between self and world collapses, mirroring Ramakrishna's reports of melting into cosmic energy. Even the mystics' bouts of uncontrollable trembling align with Kundalini awakenings, where practitioners describe energy surging up the spine like electric currents. But here's where science and spirituality diverge. While brain scans map the how, they can't explain the why, the profound transformations that followed Ramakrishna's visions. After his episodes, he exhibited savant-like abilities, instantly mastering complex Sanskrit texts despite no formal education. His mere touch reportedly sent some disciples into blissful trances. Most tellingly, his teachings rejected rigid dogma, insisting all religions were paths to the same ultimate reality. God is one, he often said, but called by different names. This radical inclusivity shocked colonial-era India, where religious divisions ran deep. Yet Ramakrishna's legacy endures precisely because it bridges ancient mysticism and modern pluralism. His experiences echo across traditions, from Christian mystics like Teresa of Avila, who described her soul dissolving into a sea of light, to Sufi poets drowning in divine love. Even secular seekers report eerily similar encounters during near-death experiences or psychedelic journeys. suggesting these states might be hardwired into human consciousness itself. The mystery lingers. Were Ramakrishna's visions glimpses of ultimate reality, or just his brain's extraordinary wiring? Perhaps the answer lies beyond either pole. His life suggests transcendence isn't about escaping the body but expanding perception until the sacred isn't out there. It's in every breath, every blade of grass, every momentary flicker of awareness. That's the real revolution of his light, not that it descended from the heavens, but that it revealed heaven was here all along, hidden in plain sight. Among the relics tied to Christ's crucifixion, none carries a darker mystique than the spear of destiny, the weapon said to have pierced his side as he hung on the cross. According to the Gospel of John, a Roman soldier named Longinus thrust the spear into Jesus' ribs, drawing forth blood and water, a moment symbolizing the mingling of divine and human natures. But unlike the humble nails or crown of thorns, this spear's legend spirals far beyond its biblical origin, weaving through empires, wars, and the hands of history's most notorious figures, each convinced it held supernatural power. One of the earliest claims traces the spear to Constantine the Great, who allegedly carried it into battle as a talisman after converting to Christianity. Centuries later, Charlemagne supposedly wielded it in 47 undefeated campaigns until he dropped it once and died that same day. The Habsburg emperors enshrined it in Vienna's Hofburg Palace, where it became one of Europe's most venerated relics. But its most chilling chapter began in 1938, when Adolf Hitler, obsessed with occult artifacts, seized the spear after annexing Austria. Nazi occultists believed whoever possessed it could control the fate of nations, a belief Hitler took seriously enough to display it in Nuremberg, the heart of his regime. What makes the Spear of Destiny so compelling isn't just its Chinese letter lineage, it's the eerie consistency of its legend. Those who held it often met sudden, dramatic downfalls. Hitler's possession lasted until 1945, when American troops recovered the spear in a secret tunnel beneath Nuremberg. General George Patton, a man fascinated by reincarnation and destiny, reportedly held it and whispered, "The legend is true." Within months, Hitler was dead, and Patton himself died mysteriously after a car crash. Coincidence, perhaps, but the pattern is unsettling enough to make even skeptics pause. Modern scholars debate which of several existing spears might be the true relic. Vienna's version, a medieval lance with an embedded nail said to be from the crucifixion, underwent restoration in recent years, revealing Carolingian-era craftsmanship too late to be the original. Another contender in Armenia, the Spear of Longinus, bears ancient inscriptions but lacks clear provenance. Then there's the Vatican's lance, shrouded in secrecy, never fully examined. Science may never confirm any as authentic, but the power of belief remains undeniable. The spear's allure taps into something primal, the idea that objects can absorb history's energy, becoming vessels of destiny. Whether viewed as divine instrument, psychological projection, or mere myth, its legacy forces a haunting question. Do we shape the objects we revere, or do they, in some unfathomable way, shape us? Across 2 millennia, the Spear of Destiny has been a mirror for humanity's best and worst ambitions, proving that some relics aren't just artifacts. They are stories we can't stop telling, no matter where the truth lies. Saint Elizabeth of Hungary's legend begins with a simple act of kindness, one that would blossom into one of Christianity's most enduring symbols of divine grace. In the bitter winter of 1226, the young noblewoman, known for her tireless charity, smuggled bread from the castle kitchens to feed starving peasants. Her husband, the stern Duke Ludwig of Thuringia, had grown suspicious of her generosity, fearing she was depleting their stores. One fateful morning, as Elizabeth hurried through the castle corridors with her apron bundled full of hidden loaves, Ludwig intercepted her. "What do you carry?" he demanded. Knowing discovery would mean punishment, she hesitated, then opened her cloak to reveal not bread, but a cascade of crimson roses, fresh as if plucked in midsummer. The stunned Duke fell to his knees, his skepticism shattered by the impossible. The miracle of the roses wasn't just a quaint medieval tale, it was a theological lightning bolt. In an era when nobility rarely mingled with the poor, Elizabeth's defiance of social hierarchy mirrored the radical compassion of her faith. The roses themselves carried layered meaning. Medieval Christians saw them as emblems of martyrdom, their thorns, and divine love, their petals, while their sudden appearance in winter whispered of God's ability to bring beauty from barrenness. But the deeper miracle lay in the timing. Historians note that Elizabeth performed this act during a famine, when grain was scarce and hoarding bread could have sparked rebellion. By transforming necessity into abundance, the miracle underscored a provocative truth. True charity often flourishes in the face of scarcity. Skeptics, of course, have alternate explanations. Some suggest a sympathetic servant swapped the bread for flowers, while psychologists propose Ludwig experienced a guilt-induced hallucination. Yet the story's power endures because it transcends literalism. Whether divine intervention or metaphorical flourish, the roses became a mirror for Elizabeth's life. Just as their beauty concealed thorns, her piety hid fierce resilience. She'd later defy her family to establish hospitals, even washing lepers' wounds herself. When she died at just 24, worn out by austerity, the rose miracle became her defining legacy, immortalized in frescoes from Budapest to Bavaria. Modern pilgrims still visit her shrine in Marburg, where the air smells perpetually of roses despite no flowers being present. Scientists have tested the phenomenon, finding no hidden scent dispensers, only an eerie sweetness that clings to the stone. Whether psychological suggestion or something stranger, the effect reinforces the legend's core paradox. Sometimes the most profound blessings are the ones we can't see until we're forced to look closer. Elizabeth's roses remind us that faith, like winter blooms, often reveals itself in the least expected places, transforming suspicion into wonder and scarcity into a sign that there's always enough to share. The ground trembled beneath the Israelites' feet as they camped at the base of Mount Sinai, an entire nation holding its breath in the pre-dawn darkness. Then, without warning, the sky tore open. Thunder that sounded like the roar of 1,000 beasts shook the mountainside, while jagged forks of lightning set the clouds ablaze. The Book of Exodus describes the summit engulfed in fire. The very air vibrating as a trumpet blast grew louder and louder until the people clutched their ears in terror. And then, from the heart of the storm, came a voice not in the language of men, but in a tongue so vast, witnesses swore the words were etched into the rocks themselves. This was no ordinary storm. This was the moment God spoke the 10 Commandments, forging a covenant that would shape the moral spine of civilizations for millennia. But was this theophany, this visible manifestation of the divine, purely supernatural, or could the raw power of nature have played a role? Geologists point to Sinai's rugged terrain, part of a region crisscrossed with fault lines and ancient volcanic activity. The descriptions of smoke, fire, and deafening trumpet sounds eerily parallel volcanic eruptions, where pyroclastic flows mimic descending smoke, and tremors generate low-frequency booms mistaken for celestial horns. The pillar of fire leading the Israelites by night could mirror the glow of distant lava, while the thick darkness of the 9th plague resembles volcanic ash blotting out the sun. Even the mountain's prohibition against touch, lest the people break through to the Lord and perish, aligns with taboos surrounding sacred volcanoes in other ancient cultures. Yet the biblical account defies purely natural explanations. The voice from Sinai didn't just rumble, it articulated specific laws with grammatical precision. The lightning didn't strike randomly but converged on the summit like a beacon. Most tellingly, the event's timing was meticulously choreographed. 3 days of purification preceded it, and the people were warned to stay within exact boundaries. This wasn't chaos, it was revelation wrapped in the trappings of a storm. Theologians argue the deliberate blending of natural and supernatural was the point, God speaking through creation itself, using phenomena humans could recognize but elevating them beyond nature's limits. The impact of Sinai's thunder echoes far beyond theology. This moment crystallized the radical idea of ethical monotheism, a single God demanding moral accountability rather than ritual bribes. Unlike the capricious gods of Egypt or Mesopotamia, Yahweh's commandments applied equally to kings and shepherds. The laws etched in stone became the blueprint for Western legal systems, their prohibitions against theft, murder, and perjury still foundational today. Even secular scholars acknowledge Sinai as a cultural watershed. The moment myth hardened into moral code, but the deepest mystery lingers in the paradox of the encounter. The same voice that split the sky also whispered to Elijah in a still small voice centuries later. The God who could level mountains chose to speak not in force, but in words meant to be wrestled with, debated, and internalized. Perhaps that's Sinai's enduring power, not just in the fire, but in the silence that followed, leaving generations to wonder. Was the miracle the spectacle itself, or the fact that amidst the roar of heaven, humanity was trusted to listen? On a rain-soaked August evening in 1879, the quiet village of Knock in County Mayo, Ireland, became the stage for one of the most enigmatic apparitions in modern religious history. As darkness fell, 15 villagers ranging in age from 5 to 75 witnessed a surreal tableau materialize on the gable wall of their humble parish church, three luminous figures bathed in golden light. At the center stood the Virgin Mary, her hands raised in prayer, crowned with roses. To her right, Saint Joseph inclined his head toward her, while to her left, Saint John the Evangelist held an open book, his other hand raised as if preaching. Beside them hovered an altar bearing a lamb and cross, an unmistakable reference to Christ's sacrifice. What made this vision extraordinary wasn't just its clarity, but its silence. Unlike other Marian apparitions that delivered urgent messages, the Knock figures spoke no words. They simply appeared, drenched in unearthly radiance, for 2 hours as the stunned villagers knelt in the mud, reciting prayers despite the relentless downpour that somehow left both the vision and their clothes untouched by water. The aftermath unfolded with startling consistency. Witness interviews conducted separately by both church officials and skeptical journalists revealed identical details. The figures' postures, the lamb's positioning, even the way Mary's eyes seemed to follow observers as they circled the churchyard. An 80-year-old woman named Bridget Trench broke through the crowd to embrace the Virgin's feet, only to find her arms passing through what looked like solid light. They were not of this earth, she later testified, yet more real than you or I. Even the local Protestant rector, deeply suspicious of Catholic claims, admitted the gathering wasn't typical of peasant hysteria, noting the witnesses' subdued reverence. The church, typically slow to endorse such events, fast-tracked Knock's approval within 5 years, a stark contrast to decades-long investigations at Lourdes or Fátima. But Knock's significance extended beyond the supernatural. Ireland in 1879 was a nation on its knees. The Great Famine's scars still bled. Evictions and emigration had hollowed out villages. The apparition's timing, on the eve of the harvest festival, felt like a balm for collective trauma. Unlike fiery, apocalyptic warnings at places like La Salette, Knock's silent, serene figures offered quiet reassurance, a visual sermon of perseverance. Pilgrims began arriving within weeks, many leaving crutches or canes at the site after unexplained healings. By the early 20th century, Knock had transformed from a forgotten hamlet into a spiritual beacon, its basilica rising like a defiant answer to Ireland's long suffering. Modern analyzers propose theories ranging to mass hallucination fueled by hunger or the era's apocalyptic anxieties. Yet the sheer diversity of witnesses, men, women, children, the elderly, undermines explanations rooted in groupthink. Some researchers note the gable wall faced west, where the setting sun could have created a shadow play, but this fails to explain how the vision persisted after nightfall or why only specific biblical figures appeared. The absence of speech, often a hallmark of hoaxes, adds another layer of mystery. Why stage such a spectacle without a message? Today, Knox's legacy thrives in paradox. Its silence speaks volumes about faith's nonverbal power, while its imagery, especially St. John holding the Book of Revelation, resonates with Ireland's identity as a land of storytellers and survivors. The original church wall still stands, its rough stone unchanged by time or weather, as if the very fabric of the place absorbed some trace of that luminous August night. Whether divine intervention or collective vision, Knock endures as a testament to how even the quietest moments of wonder can echo across centuries, shaping not just individual belief but the soul of a nation. The days following the crucifixion should have been the end. Jesus' followers had watched their beloved teacher die in agony, his body sealed in a tomb under Roman guard. Grief-stricken and terrified, they huddled behind locked doors, fearing they'd be next. Then, impossibly, the unthinkable began to happen. Encounters so vivid, so visceral, they shattered despair and birthed a movement that would change the world. The resurrection appearances span a spectrum of intimacy and awe. Mary Magdalene mistakes Jesus for a gardener until he speaks her name in the pre-dawn dimness of the tomb. Thomas refuses belief until he presses his fingers into ragged wounds. Disciples on the road to Emmaus walk for miles with a stranger who feels achingly familiar, only recognizing him when he breaks bread. And in a moment both tender and overwhelming, Jesus cooks breakfast for his friends by the shore of Galilee, the scent of fish and charcoal mingling with the salt air as if to say, "Look, I'm real." Touch the scars, but how do we reconcile these accounts? The Gospels diverge on details. Some describe Jesus passing through walls, others show him eating solid food. Skeptics propose grief hallucinations, a phenomenon well documented in bereavement studies where mourners report seeing, hearing, or even conversing with lost loved ones, especially in the raw immediacy of loss. Neurologists point to temporal lobe stimulation, which can conjure apparitions so lifelike they defy rational doubt. Even Paul's later vision on the road to Damascus, an encounter that transformed Christianity's fiercest persecutor into its greatest apostle, mirrors near-death experiences where light and voices feel divinely sent. Yet the resurrection narratives push back against simple psychological explanations. Hallucinations are typically private, yet the Gospels describe group sightings, 500 people at once, according to Paul. Grief visions rarely involve physical interaction, yet Jesus invites touch, shares meals, even clarifies he's not a ghost by saying, "A spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see I have." Then there's the empty tomb itself, a stubborn fact that even ancient critics struggle to dismiss. The earliest Jewish counterarguments preserved in Matthew's Gospel accuse the disciples of stealing the body, a tacit admission that something was missing. The resurrection's power lies in its refusal to fit neatly into any category. For believers, it's the ultimate triumph over death, proof that love outlasts the grave. For skeptics, it's a case study in how trauma rewires perception, how hope can sculpt raw grief into something transcendent. But perhaps the most compelling detail isn't theological or scientific, it's human. These weren't mythical heroes encountering a god on a mountaintop. They were fishermen and tax collectors, grieving friends who'd buried their hope alongside their teacher. Their accounts pulse with unvarnished realism, doubt, confusion, even fear woven into joy. Whether read as miracle or metaphor, the resurrection appearances share an undeniable thread. They transformed cowering followers into fearless witnesses. The same men who fled the crucifixion would soon face torture and execution, unwavering in their claim that death wasn't the end. Something happened in those 40 days, something so profound it turned terror into unshakable conviction. And maybe that's the greatest mystery of all, not just whether Jesus rose, but how that belief, real or imagined, could remake the world. The sea off Japan's coast churned with unnatural fury in the autumn of 1281, as the largest naval force ever assembled. Nearly 4,000 Mongol ships bore down on the archipelago. Kublai Khan's armada had already conquered China and Korea. Japan, fractured by civil war, seemed doomed. Then, as samurai clans braced for annihilation, the skies darkened. A tempest unlike any recorded memory tore across the strait, swallowing entire fleets in waves as tall as castles. By dawn, the invaders were gone, scattered into the depths or dashed against the rocks. The Japanese called it kamikaze, the divine wind, but this wasn't just luck. It was the second time in 7 years these typhoons had annihilated Mongol fleets. Shinto priests claimed the storms were summoned by kami, the spirits worshipped at shrines like Eyes and USA, who answered desperate prayers to protect the sacred islands. Chronicles describe priests performing frantic Kito rituals, their robes whipping in the gales as they called upon the gods of wind and sea. The Mongols, unfamiliar with the region's brutal autumn typhoons, had anchored their ships in tight formations, a fatal mistake when the winds reached 120 miles per hour. Wreckage later washed ashore for decades, tangled with bones and shattered armor. Modern meteorology reveals how geography conspired with legend. The East China Sea funnels storms into narrow straits, amplifying their power, a phenomenon sailors now call the Typhoon Alley. Sediment cores from Imari Bay show layers of shattered ship timbers dating precisely to the invasions, mixed with weapons bearing Mongol seals. Historians note that Kublai Khan's heavy Chinese-style vessels, designed for rivers, stood no chance against open ocean turbulence. Yet the timing still feels uncanny. Both invasions were thwarted by storms striking at the pivotal moment, as if the very weather chose sides. The kamikaze mythos endured far beyond the 13th century, resurfacing tragically in World War II when pilots embraced the name for suicide missions. But the original divine wind wasn't about destruction, it was about deliverance. The typhoons became proof in Japanese consciousness that the islands were Shinkoku, a land guarded by gods. Even today, visitors to Hakazaki Shrine in Fukuoka can see the Moko Shorai Ekatoba, a medieval scroll depicting drowning invaders pleading to Buddha as lightning splits their masts. Whether divine intervention or freak climatology, the kamikaze whispers a timeless truth. Sometimes the forces that shape history aren't kings or armies, but the untamed breath of the earth itself. And in that space between storm and salvation, faith and fact blur into something beyond explanation. On the sun-baked island of Cyprus, where ancient olive groves whisper with the ghosts of empires, a small village church became the epicenter of a mystery that blurred the lines between the sacred and the scientific. It began in 1994, when parishioners at the Church of St. Nicholas in the village of Lamisos noticed something impossible: tears welling from the eyes of their beloved Virgin Mary icon, trickling down her painted cheeks like liquid sorrow. Within days, the entire village had gathered, their collective breath catching as each drop fell. But this wasn't an isolated incident. Over the next decade, dozens of icons across Cyprus, some centuries old, others freshly painted, began weeping in Orthodox Christian homes and monasteries, their tears sometimes appearing fragrant, other times thick as oil. Forensic teams rushed to analyze the phenomenon. Chemists from the University of Cyprus collected samples and made a startling discovery. The tears weren't paint, water, or condensation, but a substance resembling human tears, complete with organic compounds like lysozyme, an enzyme found in emotional crying. Even stranger, some samples contained traces of myrrh, a resin used in ancient anointings, despite no myrrh being present in the churches. When physicists examined the icons under ultraviolet light, they found no hidden reservoirs or tampering, just porous wood-absorbing liquid in ways that defied gravity. The tears moved upward along the grain, noted Dr. Andreas Kautras, a materials scientist, like watching a film played in reverse. For the faithful, these weren't chemical curiosities but coded messages. Many pointed to the timing. The first tears appeared during UN-brokered peace talks to heal Cyprus's division between Greek and Turkish communities. "The Virgin weeps for our fractured island," whispered one elderly woman, her own cheeks wet as she kissed the icon. Others saw warnings of impending disasters, noting that a weeping icon in the mountain village of Kiko had shed tears before a deadly earthquake in 1995. The church, cautious but intrigued, formed a council of bishops and scientists to investigate, ultimately declaring several cases worthy of veneration, while discreetly retiring others where fraud was suspected. Skeptics proposed theories. Psychologist Maria Ioannou suggested projective pareidolia, the human tendency to see meaningful patterns like tear tracks in random moisture. Art conservators noted that older icons painted with egg tempera on wood can develop micro-fissures that wick humidity from the air. Yet these explanations faltered when confronted with recurring details. Tears that stopped abruptly when moved to laboratories, or icons that wept only on feast days like the Dormition of the Theotokos. One family in Nicosia claimed their home icon wept blood during a son's battle with leukemia. A sample tested at a secular hospital confirmed it shared his rare blood type. The deeper you dig, the more the mystery bifurcates. Science can explain how wood absorbs liquid, but not why certain icons seem to choose their moments. Faith can interpret the tears as divine grief, but cannot account for the times they appear to mislead or confuse. Perhaps the most poignant interpretation comes from Father Macaulay, a monk at Kiko's monastery. "Miracles are not proofs to convince skeptics," he muses, running a finger along the dry cheek of a once weeping icon. "They are whispers to those already listening." Whether the tears flowed from heaven or some undiscovered capillary action within the wood, their impact was undeniably real, bridging the gap between the tangible and the transcendent, one glistening drop at a time. High on the slopes of Mount Tabor, something extraordinary pierced the veil between heaven and earth. Jesus, the humble rabbi from Nazareth, suddenly blazed with a light so intense, his face shone like the sun, his robes whiter than any fuller on earth could bleach them. This was the Transfiguration, a moment where, according to the Gospels, the divine reality hidden beneath Jesus' human form blazed forth for 3 stunned disciples to witness. But this wasn't just a dazzling light show. As Peter, James, and John watched in awe, 2 figures materialized beside Jesus: Moses, the great lawgiver, and Elijah, the fiery prophet, their presence weaving together the threads of law and prophecy that Jesus would fulfill. Then, as if the cosmos itself affirmed the scene, a luminous cloud enveloped them, and a voice thundered, "This is my beloved Son, listen to him." What makes this event so fascinating is how it bridges multiple worlds of understanding. The radiant light recalls descriptions of divine encounters across cultures, from the luminous Buddha of Tibetan tradition to the blinding kavod glory of Yahweh in the Hebrew Bible. Mystics through the ages have described similar experiences of uncreated light, a glow not cast by any source but emanating from within, as if the material world briefly turned transparent to a greater reality. Eastern Orthodox Christianity even has a term for this, Tabor light, a divine energy said to have transfigured not just Jesus, but later saints like Gregory Palamas, whose own face reportedly shone during deep prayer. But could there be a natural explanation? Some scholars point to the mountain's role as a thin place, where the boundary between realms feels permeable. Mount Tabor's isolated peak, often shrouded in mist, creates atmospheric conditions ripe for optical phenomena like the Brocken spectre, a magnified shadow surrounded by rainbow halos known to startle climbers. Others speculate about rare electromagnetic disturbances documented in fault zones like the nearby Jordan Rift Valley, which can trigger hallucinations of light and sound. Even the timing is suggestive. The Transfiguration occurred during the Feast of Tabernacles, when Jerusalem's temple courts were illuminated by massive menorahs, their glow visible for miles. Could the disciples have internalized this festival of light, their minds weaving it into a vision of cosmic significance? Yet the event's deeper symbolism resists reduction to physics or psychology. Moses and Elijah represent the twin pillars of Jewish tradition, the law and the prophets appearing not as rivals but as witnesses passing the torch to Jesus. The cloud evokes the Shekinah, the visible presence of God that guided Israel through the wilderness, and the voice from heaven echoes Jesus' baptism, but with a crucial addition: listen to him. This wasn't just affirmation, it was a directive to prioritize Jesus' teachings even over revered figures like Moses. The Transfiguration thus becomes a pivot point where the Old Covenant leans into the New. The mystery lingers in the aftermath. Jesus instructs the disciples to keep silent about what they've seen until the Son of Man rises from the dead, a phrase that baffled them at the time. Why show them this glory only to veil it again? Perhaps because the Transfiguration wasn't just about revealing divinity, but preparing them for the paradox to come. The same radiant Messiah would soon be stripped, beaten, and nailed to a cross. The light on Tabor was a beacon in the gathering darkness, a promise that even in suffering, the glory was real. And for those 3 disciples who'd later falter and flee at Gethsemane, this memory may have been the tether that eventually drew them back, proof that the man they followed was more than a teacher, more even than a prophet, but the very light of the world. Whether read as supernatural event, psychological archetype, or both, the Transfiguration's power endures because it speaks to a universal human longing, to glimpse, however briefly, the brilliance behind the veil of the ordinary. In that flash of light on the mountain, the mundane burned away, and for one fleeting moment the disciples saw not just who Jesus was, but who they and all of us might become when touched by that same uncreated radiance. And that vision, once seen, can never truly be unseen. The story of Hanukkah's miracle begins in the shadow of empire and rebellion, in a Jerusalem stripped of its sanctity. The year was 165 BCE, and the Jewish people had just reclaimed their temple from the Seleucid king Antiochus IV, who had desecrated its halls with idols of Zeus and sacrificed pigs on the altar. As the Maccabee rebels swept through the city, their victory was bittersweet. The temple stood defiled, its golden menorah extinguished. According to the Talmud, when Judah Maccabee and his followers entered to rededicate the sanctuary, they found only a single cruse of ritually pure olive oil, enough to keep the menorah burning for a single day. Preparing new oil would take 8 days, yet when they lit the flames, the impossible happened. That meager vial burned uninterrupted for 8 nights, long enough to press and consecrate fresh oil. This miracle seems simple at first glance, but its layers run deep. Olive oil in ancient Judea wasn't just fuel, it symbolized wisdom, purity, and divine favor. The fact that it burned beyond natural limits carried a potent message. Even when resources appear exhausted, faith can multiply what little remains. Historians note that the story, recorded centuries after the events in the Talmud, may have been a later addition to elevate Hanukkah's spiritual significance beyond its military origins. The books of Maccabees, written closer to the time, focus on the revolt's battles without mentioning the oil. Yet the absence of contemporary accounts doesn't necessarily negate the miracle. It might reflect how oral traditions crystallized around tangible symbols to preserve the rebellion's deeper meaning. Modern Hanukkah celebrations still revolve around this interplay of light and resilience. Each night, families gather to light the menorah, adding a candle to commemorate the oil's enduring glow. Foods fried in oil, crisp latkes, and jelly-filled safgan turn the kitchen into a culinary tribute, but there's a quieter lesson woven into these rituals. Unlike Passover's grand narrative or Yom Kippur's solemnity, Hanukkah's miracle is intimate, almost humble. It doesn't involve parted seas or celestial voices, just a small flask of oil outlasting its limits. In this way, the story speaks to anyone who's felt their own reserves running low. A student burning the midnight oil before exams, a caregiver stretching limited energy, an activist kindling hope in dark times. Science has tried to rationalize the miracle, with theories ranging from a misunderstanding of wick combustion rates to the possibility of oil-soaked limestone prolonging the burn. Yet these explanations miss the point. The miracle wasn't in the oil's chemistry but in its timing, a precisely calibrated symbol of endurance when morale was most fragile. The Maccabees had just fought a guerrilla war against overwhelming odds. Their temple stood in ruins. That single cruce's persistence mirrored their own. Both seemed destined to flicker out, yet both endured long enough to reignite something far greater. Perhaps that's why Hanukkah resonates so powerfully today, even for those who don't take the miracle literally. In a world where light often feels fleeting, where justice, hope, or joy can seem like dwindling resources, the story whispers that sometimes, against all logic, what we have is enough. The menorah's flames don't just commemorate an ancient wonder, they defy the darkness candle by candle, insisting that small acts of perseverance can outlast even the longest nights. And in that defiance, whether miraculous or metaphorical, lies a truth that transcends any single faith. Light, once kindled, refuses to be measured by the clock. Nestled among the rugged hills of Herzegovina, the small village of Medjugorje became an unlikely epicenter of global devotion in June 1981, when 6 local children claimed the Virgin Mary appeared to them on a rocky hillside. What began as a private vision soon exploded into a worldwide phenomenon, drawing millions of pilgrims to a place once known only for its vineyards and sheep pastures. The apparitions didn't stop after that first encounter. Unlike most Marian sightings, which fade after days or weeks, these continued for decades, with 3 of the original visionaries still reporting regular messages as of 2024. The events followed a pattern both intimate and surreal. Each visionary described Mary, or Gospa, as they called her in the local dialect, as a luminous figure bathed in light, her voice barely above a whisper. She allegedly shared secrets about future global events, some revealed to the public, others sealed for later disclosure. At first, the communist Yugoslav authorities tried to suppress the claims, even imprisoning the parish priest and cutting off access to the site. But the harder they cracked down, the more fervent the devotion grew. Families snuck up the hill at night, guided by flickering candlelight, while makeshift altars sprang up in living rooms across the village. The Vatican's stance has been cautious, to say the least. After years of investigation, Pope Francis acknowledged Medjugorje's spiritual significance in 2019, granting official permission for organized pilgrimages while stopping short of endorsing the apparitions as supernatural. It's a delicate dance. On one hand, the Church recognizes the fruits of Medjugorje, countless conversions, healings, and vocations sparked by visits there. On the other, the sheer duration of the claims is unprecedented in Marian apparition history, raising eyebrows among even the most open-minded theologians. Science has waded into the debate with mixed results. Skeptics point to mass hysteria, noting how the initial visions coincided with a period of intense Yugoslav nationalism and economic hardship. Psychologists highlight the power of group reinforcement. Once one child described seeing Mary, the others might have interpreted their own experiences through that lens. Yet some details resist easy dismissal. Multiple witnesses reported the sun dancing in the sky over Medjugorje, a phenomenon eerily similar to descriptions from Fátima. Others described sudden healings of conditions like blindness or terminal cancer, documented by doctors but lacking clear medical explanations. What's undeniable is Medjugorje's tangible impact. The once sleepy village now hosts over 1 million visitors annually, its streets lined with guest houses, cafes, and shops selling religious souvenirs. Pilgrims climb the steep Podbodo hill barefoot, their knees scraping against jagged limestone as they pray the rosary. At night, the parish church overflows with worshippers from every continent, their voices blending in a dozen languages during adoration. For many, it's not about proving or disproving the visions. It's about encountering something transcendent in the collective longing that permeates the air. Critics argue Medjugorje reflects the dangers of unchecked devotion, pointing to financial exploitation and doctrinal deviations among fringe groups that have sprung up around the messages. Supporters counter that the core of the phenomenon, prayer, fasting, and peace, aligns perfectly with gospel values, regardless of its supernatural validity. The truth may lie somewhere in between, in the gray space where faith meets human yearning. Whether divine intervention or profound psychological mystery, Medjugorje endures as a testament to humanity's unshakable hunger for the sacred, a village where the line between heaven and earth feels tantalizingly thin. And in that tension, pilgrims keep coming, not for answers, but for the chance to stand on a hillside where just maybe the veil between worlds flickers like a candle in the wind. In the stillness of a mountain cave outside Mecca, a 40-year-old man named Muhammad sought solitude far from the noise of the city. It was the year 610, during the holy month of Ramadan, when the night air hummed with an eerie tension. Then, without warning, the darkness shattered. A towering figure filled the cavern's mouth, his presence so overwhelming that Muhammad later described feeling as if his soul was being crushed. Read, the figure commanded, though Muhammad, an illiterate merchant, had never held a book. When he protested, the being identified as the angel Gabriel gripped him with terrifying force and repeated the demand. Suddenly, words surged through Muhammad's lips, words not his own. Recite in the name of your Lord who created man from a clinging substance. These verses, now etched into the Quran's opening lines, mark the explosive beginning of a revelation that would reshape continents. This moment on Mount Hira was more than a personal epiphany. It was the birth of Islam's sacred text. Over the next 23 years, Muhammad would receive revelations in fragments, often accompanied by physical rigors. Witnesses described him sweating profusely in cold weather, his breath coming in labored gasps as divine speech poured through him. Unlike the poetic trances of pagan soothsayers, these utterances carried a rhythmic precision that stunned even his harshest critics. The Quran's linguistic complexity became its own miracle despite Muhammad's illiteracy. Its Arabic surpassed the era's finest poetry, weaving legal principles, cosmic metaphors, and moral imperatives into an unchallengeable literary masterpiece. Yet the revelation's earliest years were fraught with peril. Muhammad's message of monotheism threatened Mecca's pagan elite, whose power depended on pilgrimages to the Kaaba, then a hub of polytheistic worship. Mocked as a madman or possessed by jinn, he faced boycotts, stone-throwing mobs, and assassination attempts. The Quran itself reflects this struggle, with early verses emphasizing spiritual introspection, while later revelations, after Muhammad's migration to Medina, delve into social justice and governance. This evolution mirrors Islam's journey from persecuted faith to a civilization's cornerstone. Modern scholars grapple with the revelation's nature. Some neurologists suggest temporal lobe epilepsy could explain Muhammad's visions and sensory overload, a theory contested by the Quran's consistent coherence across decades. Others note parallels with prophetic call narratives in Jewish and Christian traditions. Moses at the burning bush, Paul blinded on the road to Damascus, suggesting a shared archetype of divine encounter. What's undeniable is the revelation's transformative power. Within a century of Muhammad's death, the Quran's verses had ignited an intellectual golden age, bridging Greek philosophy, Persian astronomy, and Indian mathematics under the banner of Tawhid, God's oneness. The miracle of Muhammad's revelation isn't just in its origin, but in its endurance. Unlike scriptures transcribed generations after their founders' deaths, the Quran was memorized verbatim by thousands during Muhammad's lifetime. its oral transmission so meticulous that today's recitations mirror 7th century pronunciations. For over 1 billion Muslims, these words aren't history, they're a living dialogue with the divine, unchanging yet endlessly reinterpreted. Whether heard in Cairo's bustling alleyways or Jakarta's neon-lit mosques, the Quran's first command, read, still echoes, an invitation to seek knowledge as the purest act of worship. And in that call, whispered first to an unlettered man in a mountain cave, lies a revolution that forever changed how humanity hears the voice of the sacred. Every year, on the eve of Orthodox Easter, a hush falls over the packed church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Thousands of pilgrims press shoulder to shoulder in the dimly lit nave, their faces flickering in candlelight, all eyes fixed on the small, sealed edicule marking Christ's tomb. Then, just as anticipation reaches its peak, something extraordinary unfolds. A blue flame bursts to life inside the tomb, seemingly without human intervention. The Greek Orthodox patriarch emerges holding a bundle of candles now ablaze, and the fire spreads through the crowd like a living thing, leaping from wick to wick without burning skin or fabric. To believers, this is the holy fire, a miracle reaffirming God's presence in the world. To skeptics, it's an elaborate ruse, a centuries-old trick of smoke and mirrors. But the truth, as always, lies somewhere in the tension between devotion and doubt. The ceremony's roots stretch back at least to the 9th century, with written accounts describing a divine flame igniting in the tomb on Holy Saturday. Medieval pilgrims carried the fire home in lanterns, claiming it burned miraculously for days or even weeks. The ritual's symbolism is potent, light emerging from darkness echoing Christ's resurrection. Yet the mechanics have long been shrouded in secrecy. Before entering the tomb, the patriarch is thoroughly searched by Israeli authorities to dispel suspicions of hidden lighters or matches. The edicule's interior is sealed with wax, inspected by clergy of multiple denominations to ensure no tampering. Once the door is shut, the crowd waits in breathless silence, sometimes minutes, sometimes hours until the flame appears. Skeptics have proposed theories over the years. Some suggest concealed chemicals, like white phosphorus, could ignite spontaneously when exposed to air. Others point to clever pyrotechnics, hidden wires or pre-lit candles shielded behind panels. A BBC documentary in 2005 claimed to replicate the effect using a simple flame source and careful timing, though the Greek Orthodox Church fiercely disputed its methods. What complicates these explanations are the countless first-hand accounts of anomalies. Pilgrims insist the fire initially feels cool to the touch, only warming after several minutes. Some claim their candles ignited without direct contact, as if the flame jumped across empty air. Even non-believers admit the atmosphere in the church is electric, a collective euphoria that defies clinical dissection. The holy fire also serves as a rare moment of unity in a fractured holy site. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is shared by 6 Christian denominations: Greek Orthodox, Armenian, Catholic, Coptic, Syriac, and Ethiopian, whose rivalries have sometimes led to physical altercations over territorial rights. Yet on Holy Saturday they stand together, their doctrinal differences momentarily set aside. The fire's dispersal follows strict protocol, first to the Armenians, then the Copts, and so on, a delicate dance of diplomacy amid the flames. This fragile cooperation hints at the miracle's deeper function, not just as a supernatural sign, but as a force that, however briefly, bridges ancient divides. Perhaps the most compelling detail is the fire's behavior after the ceremony. Pilgrims carry it home in special lanterns, and some report it burning with an uncanny steadiness, even in wind or rain. In 2008, a Russian physicist named Andrei Volkov conducted spectral analysis of the flame, claiming it lacked the typical sodium signature of natural fire, suggesting an unknown combustion source. While his methods were criticized, the study added fuel to the debate. The fire's persistence in the face of scrutiny mirrors faith itself, elusive, adaptable, resistant to definitive proof or disproof. Whether divine intervention or human ingenuity, the holy fire endures because it satisfies a primal longing for light in darkness, for wonder in a world too often stripped of mystery. It asks no doctrinal allegiance, only a willingness to stand in that crowded church, feeling the heat of the flames and the weight of centuries pressing in, and decide for oneself what flickers behind the veil of smoke. And perhaps that's the real miracle, not how the fire starts, but how it keeps burning generation after generation, in hearts as much as in hands. In April 1968, a bus mechanic named Farouk Mohammed Atwar was crossing a dusty square in the Cairo suburb of Zaytown when his gaze drifted upward and his heart lurched. There, hovering silently above the dome of St. Mary's Coptic Church, stood a woman bathed in an unearthly glow. Her robes rippled as if caught in an unfelt wind, and around her head, a pulsing halo of light cast jagged shadows across the rooftops. Within minutes, the street swarmed with onlookers, Muslims, Christians, even staunch atheists, all gaping at the same impossible sight. Some fell to their knees, weeping. Others fumbled with cameras, capturing images that would soon ricochet around the world. This was no fleeting apparition. Over the next 3 years, the luminous figure returned again and again, witnessed by hundreds of thousands, including Egypt's president and a team of baffled government scientists. The sheer scale of the Zaytown phenomenon defies easy categorization. Unlike typical Marian apparitions reported in secluded fields or to small groups, these sightings occurred in a densely packed urban area, often lasting hours and visible from multiple vantage points. Police reports from the time described traffic grinding to a halt as drivers abandoned their cars to watch the figure perform what witnesses called a dance of light, gliding between the church's spires, scattering showers of sparkling particles, even appearing to bow before onlookers. Remarkably, several photographs taken by separate individuals show nearly identical details: the figure's posture, the distinctive mandorla-shaped aura, even the way her veil seemed to billow without disturbing the still night air. Scientific investigators threw every available tool at the mystery. A meteorological team from Cairo University ruled out ball lightning or atmospheric refraction, noting the apparitions occurred in clear, stable weather. Military planes circling the area detected no unusual radiation or electromagnetic activity. Even the skeptical editor of Egypt's leading newspaper, Al-Ahram, dispatched his top photojournalists who returned with crisp images they couldn't explain. This wasn't mass hysteria, admitted Dr. Hosni Farouk, a neurologist who interviewed hundreds of witnesses. People saw the same details from different angles at different times, with no prior expectation of what they'd encounter. Yet the Virgin Mary's alleged choice of location was anything but random. St. Mary's in Zaytown was built atop a site where, according to Coptic tradition, the Holy Family rested during their flight into Egypt. More provocatively, the apparitions began on the eve of the church's anniversary, and just 17 months after Israel's capture of Jerusalem in the Six-Day War, a seismic event that traumatized the Arab world. For Egypt's Christian minority, already anxious amid rising sectarian tensions, the visions became a defiant symbol of hope. "She came to us as a mother comforting her children," reflected Father Konstantinos, the parish priest, noting how the figure occasionally made the sign of the cross over the crowd. Even Muslim scholars acknowledged the sightings, with some interpreting them through Islamic prophecies about Mary's return before Judgment Day. Debates still rage over what bathed Zaytown in celestial light. UFO researchers point to similarities with modern encounters: the silent hovering, the luminous particles, while psychologists cite the expectant attention effect, where cultural cues prime people to interpret ambiguous stimuli religiously. But one detail chills even seasoned investigators. Multiple witnesses independently described the figure releasing doves made of pure light that vanished upon touching the ground. No known natural phenomenon accounts for this, whether divine messenger, collective hallucination, or some undiscovered atmospheric anomaly. The events at Zeitown left an indelible mark. Today, the church's walls bear plaques in Arabic, English, and Hebrew testaments from those who swear they saw the impossible and came away changed. In a world hungry for wonder, Zeitown stands as a riddle that refuses to dissolve under scrutiny, its light lingering long after the last witness passed into memory. In the spring of 1827, a young farmer named Joseph Smith walked into a wooded hillside near Palmyra, New York, with a promise burning in his mind. According to his later account, an angel named Moroni had appeared to him in a vision, directing him to a buried stone box containing a set of golden plates etched with ancient writings. These weren't just artifacts, they were scripture, a lost record of a pre-Columbian civilization that had encountered Christ on the American continent. Smith claimed the plates were written in Reformed Egyptian, an unknown script he translated through divine aid using a set of seer stones placed in a hat. The result, the Book of Mormon, the foundational text of what would become the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, one of the fastest-growing religious movements in history. The golden plates occupy a paradoxical space in religious lore, simultaneously central to Mormon theology and shrouded in controversy. Unlike other sacred artifacts, they weren't displayed publicly after their alleged discovery. Smith stated that after completing the translation, he returned the plates to Moroni, leaving no physical evidence for scholars to examine. Witnesses, however, played a crucial role in legitimizing the claim. 11 men, including Smith's close associates, signed affidavits testifying they'd either seen the plates or handled them, describing the metal sheets as golden in color and bound by rings. These testimony of the witnesses remains printed in every copy of the Book of Mormon, a rare instance of a religious text anchoring its validity in eyewitness accounts. Yet even here, contradictions emerge. Some witnesses later recanted or gave conflicting descriptions, while others maintained their testimonies until death, fueling debates about collective hallucination, coercion, or genuine supernatural experience. Modern archaeology and linguistics cast further doubt. The Book of Mormon describes advanced civilizations, the Nephites and Lamanites, with iron smelting, chariots, and old-world crops like wheat and barley. Yet no conclusive archaeological evidence supports these claims in pre-Columbian America. Reformed Egyptian, the purported language of the plates, bears no resemblance to any known script, and scholars universally dismiss its existence. Even the golden plates themselves defy practical explanation. Gold is a soft metal, ill-suited for engraving dense text, and no other ancient cultures in the Americas produced metal books. Defenders of the faith counter that divine intervention could explain these anomalies, pointing to the Bible's own miracles as precedent. Others suggest the plates may have been a temenos, a sacred object meant to inspire rather than be scrutinized, a tangible focus for Smith's revelatory experience, whether literal or symbolic. Psychological perspectives offer another lens. Smith grew up in the burned-over district of New York, a hotbed of religious revivalism and folk magic where treasure digging with seer stones was common. Some historians argue the plates fit a pattern of visionary materialization, a phenomenon in charismatic traditions where sacred objects appear supernaturally to validate a prophet's mission. The parallels to other religious founders are striking. Moses receiving stone tablets, Muhammad transcribing the Quran from a heavenly source, suggesting a recurring archetype in the birth of new faiths. The Book of Mormon's content, meanwhile, reflects early 19th century concerns. Its themes of lost tribes, ancient prophets on American soil, and a corrupted Christian tradition ripe for restoration resonated deeply with a young nation searching for spiritual identity. The legacy of the golden plates transcends their material existence. For millions of Latter-day Saints, they symbolize divine revelation tailored to the New World, a testament that God speaks outside traditional biblical confines. For skeptics, they're a case study in the power of charismatic authority and collective belief. Yet perhaps the most fascinating aspect is how the mystery endures. Unlike the Shroud of Turin or the Ark of the Covenant, the plates weren't lost, they were, by design, made permanently inaccessible. This absence paradoxically amplifies their presence, leaving room for faith to fill the void. Whether seen as sacred record or elaborate myth, the golden plates continue to spark the same question that haunted Smith's contemporaries: can something be true in spirit without being true in stone? The answer, like the plates themselves, remains just out of reach, glinting at the edges of history and belief. In the heart of Hindu cosmology lies an image so powerful it transcends time: Nataraja, the dancing Shiva, captured in eternal motion within a ring of flames. His right foot crushes the demon of ignorance, while his left leg lifts in graceful defiance of gravity. One hand holds the drum of creation, its rhythm summoning the universe into being. Another clutches the fire of destruction, reducing all things to ash. This is the cosmic dance, a single moment frozen in bronze and stone, yet pulsing with the endless cycle of existence itself. To the ancient sages who envisioned it, Nataraja wasn't just a deity. He was the embodiment of reality's fundamental rhythm, where birth and dissolution are inseparable partners in the grand performance of life. What's astonishing is how seamlessly this millennia-old metaphor aligns with modern astrophysics. Take the concept of entropy, the universe's gradual slide toward disorder, a process mirrored in Shiva's flaming hand, dissolving galaxies and stars back into cosmic dust. Yet just as the dance balances destruction with the drumbeat of creation, quantum physics reveals vacuum fluctuations where particles spontaneously emerge from nothingness, fleeting universes bubbling in and out of existence. Even the ring of fire encircling Nataraja finds its echo in the Big Bang's primordial plasma, the swirling accretion disks of black holes, or the way supernovas scatter stardust that will one day coalesce into new worlds. The dance isn't just symbolic, it's a poetic blueprint for the mechanics of reality. This cosmic choreography extends beyond the subatomic. Hindu texts describe cycles of creation lasting billions of years, kalpas, each ending in a great dissolution before the next begins. Compare this to the Big Crunch theory, where an expanding universe might eventually collapse back into a singularity, only to rebound in another explosive birth. Or consider oscillating universe models, where each cycle inherits subtle variations from the last, much like the slight shifts in a dancer's posture over countless performances. Even Shiva's rhythmic drumbeat parallels the cosmic microwave background radiation, the faint afterglow of the Big Bang, still thrumming through space like the echo of a timeless percussion. But the real genius of the Nataraja metaphor lies in its embrace of paradox. Shiva's dance isn't just about cycles, it's about simultaneity. Creation and destruction aren't sequential, they're concurrent, just as stars explode while planets form in the same galactic neighborhood. This mirrors quantum field theory, where particles and their antiparticles annihilate each other continuously, their energy neither created nor destroyed but perpetually exchanged. Even the demon under Shiva's foot, Apasmara, representing illusion, takes on new meaning in an age of dark matter and dark energy, the invisible forces shaping a universe we've barely begun to comprehend. Perhaps most strikingly, the dance dissolves the illusion of separateness. In Hindu thought, Shiva's movements sustain the cosmos, yet he remains aloof, a spectator to his own performance, an idea chillingly resonant with the participatory universe theory in quantum mechanics, where observation itself shapes reality. The dancer and the dance, the observer and the observed become one. Whether through the lens of scripture or science, the message is the same. Existence isn't a static thing to be dissected, but a dynamic, ever-unfolding process where every ending is woven into the next beginning. Standing before a Nataraja statue today, it's hard not to feel the weight of this convergence. Ancient artisans carved these icons without telescopes or particle accelerators, yet they captured truths that would take science millennia to articulate. Maybe that's the real miracle, not the accuracy of the metaphor, but the human mind's ability to glimpse the universe's deepest rhythms through art, intuition, and the quiet observation of a flickering lamp in a temple's dark corner. After all, whether you call it Shiva's dance or the laws of thermodynamics, the song remains the same. Everything is connected, everything is in motion, and nothing, not even the void, is ever truly still. From golden temples to blood-soaked battlefields, from whispered prophecies to blinding celestial light, these 35 stories of divine wonder span continents, cultures, and millennia, yet they share a single thread: humanity's unshakable hunger to touch the untouchable, to name the unnameable. Whether it's the Ark of the Covenant's lethal sanctity or the Virgin Mary's silent tears in a Cypriot village, whether it's Joan of Arc's voices or the sun spinning over Fátima, these phenomena refuse to fit neatly into boxes labeled miracle or myth. They linger in that liminal space where history and mystery collide, where the rational mind falters and something deeper, older stirs. Perhaps what unites these tales isn't their supernatural claims, but the raw human experiences behind them. A terrified soldier sees an angel in the smoke of war. A starving peasant clings to a vial of oil that burns beyond reason. A grief-stricken disciple touches a resurrected teacher's scars. These moments aren't just about proving the divine, they're about the desperation, hope, and awe that make us human. Even the skeptics among us must admit, there's something electrifying about standing on the edge of the inexplicable, where the world flickers between the ordinary and the extraordinary. So where does that leave us? These stories don't exist to convince or debunk, they exist to provoke, to remind us that the universe is far stranger than our textbooks dare admit. Maybe the real miracle is that after centuries of scientific progress, we still ache for wonder, that we still look at a weeping statue or a dancing sun and feel that primal shiver of what if. Now it's your turn. Have you ever encountered something you couldn't explain? A family legend passed down for generations, a personal moment that defied logic? Share your stories in the comments. Let's keep this conversation alive. And if you're hungry for more mysteries, don't forget to explore our other deep dives into history's greatest enigmas, from vanished civilizations to uncracked codes. Because the world is full of puzzles waiting to be pondered, and the next great mystery might be just one click away. Stay curious, keep questioning, and above all, never stop wondering.